Welcome to the OShow, Hamilton's current affairs show. I'm Laura Babcock, and they're back. That's right, we have the OShow election panel, the best panel in town on this election, because they're not afraid to say what's on their mind, and they all have an area of expertise that we can learn from. And what a month it's been since we had them on last. I can't even keep up with all the things that have gone on in some key council races and the mayor's race. We had the opportunity to interview the other front-running mayoral candidate, Andrea Horwath, and that show was quite controversial, and it's still getting a lot of views. It was also even brought up by the candidate herself during the televised mayor's debate.
Okay, you seem to be very adept at U.S. politics yourself. So you haven't heard the concern at all from anybody?
I have not. Oh, from one person, a friend of yours, Laura Babcock. We talked about it on her show.
Okay. Well, it is a valid concern.
So there's a lot going on with the conversation in Hamilton around leadership, around trust, around where you're from, around things like area rating, affordable housing. There's so much to get into. This is definitely not a sleepy election, in spite of some commentators we saw in today's Spectator. If you care about the city and its future, this election couldn't be more consequential. So let's get right to it with our panel. Dr. Ameil Joseph from McMaster University. Ameil, it's wonderful to have you on the show. And you had quite the commentary the night of the televised debate, which I'd like to touch on as well. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Hey, everyone.
And we also have Robert Pasuta. And Robert, you've got a big endorsement of Andrea Horwath at your farm tomorrow, correct?
Oh, you know all about that, do you? Yes, we do.
We do. It's the OShow. It's our job to know. And we've also got, of course, Margaret Shkimba, another Spectator columnist, not the one I was referencing a moment ago. You think this election is anything but sleepy, given all of the research you're doing on it and how invested. It's so great to have you on the program as well, Margaret.
Thanks, Laura, for having me.
And last but not least, we have Graham Crawford, who is an optimist, a critical optimist, if you look at his Twitter bio, but he's also one of the founders of IElect. And as always on this program, he can switch between hats as he wants to. But IElect is certainly getting a lot of attention in this election and had a full-page ad in the A section of this weekend's paper talking about the importance to keep voting well for good leadership. So let's start with you, Graham, on that note. Nothing going on with the mayor's race, pretty sleepy, like literally can't think of anything you have to talk about, but I'm going to let you go first. What's on your mind, sir?
Well, I actually just woke up from an election nap, so I don't, it's so sleepy. It's anything but a sleepy race. It may be a non-traditional race. I don't know about that, but at least we're not talking about LRT. What's on my mind, Laura? The mayoral campaign, clearly there's two front runners. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any secret there. And I think they're both, busy getting their messages out. One of those messages is resonating with me more than the other, but, and I've declared that personally. I fear it's getting a little nasty. And oddly enough, and maybe not oddly enough, but not just between the candidates, but between supporters. Mm-hmm. We'll get through this. I want us to, and I believe this will be the case, remain friends and come out as friends on the other side. But it's getting a little more tense than I expected it to be. Differences of opinion. I mean, we've had many of those about council things and so on. So I'm a little worried about that. But as I say, if friendships are solid, differences of opinion should not break the friendship. They may just change the tone for a short period of time. That's my wish.
And it's really, at the end of the day, about civic engagement. But I'm not going to let you off so easily, sir. You alluded to the fact that you have selected one candidate over the other, and many would think that you've already made an endorsement. Will you share it on the OShow?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to walk past or drive past my house, you'd see a great big Keenan Loomis sign at the corner of my lawn. I'm happy to also say, although this isn't the question, to have an equally large Cameron Kretsch sign beside the Loomis sign. These are my two decisions. I live in Ward 2, and of course I live in Hamilton, so I've got a mayoral sign and I've got a councillor sign. Why have I picked Keenan? I vote because I said this on to you, Laura, on this show a number of times. I voted for Andrea many times, but I'm not voting for her this time. And I would People have asked me, well, why is that? After all, why are you looking at a Chamber of Commerce past president and, business, et cetera? Well, number one, I'm a good old lefty, but I'm also a retired business person. Both can be true. And they are true in my case. And in my 30-year business career, and if I do say so myself, it was, not unsuccessful. I always had targets. We always had numbers. I worked with clients. I was a management consultant. I worked with major corporations around the world. They always had targets. I don't like it when I don't see a target, but what I like even less is when asked for targets, Andrea Horwath, in this case, dismisses the person asking for those targets. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't think that makes her evil, as some might suggest. I don't think that makes me misogynistic because I'm asking. If the roles were reversed, I'd still be asking the same question. A 30-year business career does that. I've worked with many, many senior women over those years. So that's one of the key reasons. But I'm also seeing a nastiness that I don't like. And you know what? I'm sick and tired of seeing at council. I don't want more of the same. And I'm concerned we may be getting that. I watched that Cable 14 debate, and I didn't like the tone that I saw out of candidate Horwath.
Well, I'm going to go to Pasuta. I have some thoughts, as you might imagine, and I will share them shortly. But I want to go to you, Robert, because you are doing an endorsement event at your farm in Flamborough, which is going to help her, I would imagine, out there where you're from. So why are you endorsing Andrea publicly?
Well, I've been following her when she was in the provincial government and some of the things she had brought up. And I wouldn't say she's a fighter in one way, but not a true hard fighter. And some of the comments that came out of people was the fact that she's an NDP, and I'm not supporting NDP. And I'll be honest with you, I've had a couple crop events at my farm here. Farmers come out and look at the crops, and we have speakers. And people are asking me, who would you support for mayor? And I would start going through them all, and I said, it's your choice, it's your pick. Well, then right away they'd say, well, I'm not supporting an NDP. I never voted NDP and never am. And it's so hard for people to understand that this is not about partisan politics. This is about the mayor and the leadership for the city of Hamilton as a whole. And people are just hard to get that through, just so difficult. I did have a 2-hour and 20-minute luncheon, I think about a week ago with Andrea. A lot of questions she asked me. I gave her a lot of points that I thought that she should be looking at and interested in. She seems quite interested in the rural areas and agriculture, more so than I've heard from anybody else. But I've never had the opportunity to speak to Keenan or former MP Bertina. So she's the only one that's reached out to me. And like I said, I've been following her. And of course, I think it's time, and maybe I'm wrong, and I don't know if Graham's going to get at me, but I think it's time for a true politician lady to lead municipal politics in this city. I think she has it. But I'm not taking anything away from Keenan Loomis either. It would have been interesting. It would have been interesting to have MP Bob Bertina, the candidate for the mayor's race, to been at that debate that night, and with Mike Fortune. Unfortunately, he had COVID, but it would have been interesting to see if it got a little more testy, as Graham said. And towards the end of the program there with Mike Fortune and the debate, there was a little bit of this going back and forth with Andrea and Keenan, which I think is good for politics in a way. But when we get past that point, forget about this. You got to come together. So let's wait and see. But yes, I am endorsing her, and they're coming out tomorrow to do. And then Ted Mamican had his kickoff here too at the farm.
Yeah, I saw that. And when you asked me if it was cool to be on the panel, if you were doing an endorsement, I didn't even ask you who you were endorsing, right? I said, of course.
No, you didn't. But I was afraid you'd say get lost. But it's,
never. In spite of the way that my name was raised in the debate rather sadly by Andrea, which I don't think is a good look ever. I've never seen anyone do that, waste their airtime bringing up somebody who's got nothing to do with the debate. Well, I didn't like that. I thought it was very off-putting, and I've heard from a lot of people who felt the same way. That being said, though, to your point about a provincial politician, you said provincial lady, I won't use that language, but a provincial politician coming into Hamilton, I feel like Bob Bertina is running a US-style election with these terrible attack ads and swamping people's phones, and it's off-putting. I feel like Andrea is running a provincial-style election. Maybe she's got some provincial operatives doing this, because it doesn't feel like it's connecting a lot in Hamilton. Sometimes it feels way off the mark. And I feel like Keenan is working a local election, but maybe he doesn't have quite enough time to get to meet everybody. But it certainly feels that way to me. But Margaret, let me pass it over to you, because boy, you had a tweet yesterday that I thought was pretty interesting about what Andrea said to me here that was so controversial on the show when she pivoted, when I asked her, give me something that tells me you'll be different than Fred, because I'm not getting a lot of specifics, and it sounds like Fred 2.0 what I'm hearing from you. And she said, well, I'm a woman and women lead differently. And then she went into that. And you had a comment about that in her debate performance. So I don't know if you want to start there or wherever you want to start. Where's your head at in this election?
Okay, so I'm struggling a lot with how to support Andrea in this election. And which isn't to say that I do or I don't support Keenan. Typically for me, I make up my mind in the election booth. Unless it's very clear, very, very clear. And I don't really think it's very clear for me, because I do have probably like Robert, I've followed Andrea and I've supported her for many years. And in a world that would be the best of things, right? Andrea would be a fantastic choice for the mayor in terms of her career and how she's done things. But that particular comment, when it came out, I thought it's something that women can just take out and throw on the table like it means nothing, right? Like, well, I'm a woman, I do things differently. Okay, well then do things differently. Okay, it didn't seem to me that that debate was done differently. It was old style politics, old style attack style. And frankly, her comment about people being away from here, I thought to myself as she was saying it, are you listening to what you're saying? Because you would attack somebody if somebody had said that. You know better than to say that. So it was shocking to me. That to me was, well, then do something different, because that's not different politics.
You know what, in 30, sorry, go on, Margaret, did you want to say that? I was just going to say, in 30 years of being in Hamilton, or 25, if we're counting exact numbers of how many years we're allowed to be here before we can be engaged municipally in politics, I've never had a sign on my lawn, and I wasn't planning to until that debate. It wasn't just the invocation of my name. The only other person who's ever said my name like that was Doug Ford. I didn't appreciate it. I thought it was unnecessary. But beyond that, there was the comment about, well, you've only been here for a while, and it's dangerous to think you can come into the mayor's. And I thought, what on earth? I mean, Keenan might be a lot of things, but dangerous ain't one of them. And many of us are not born here. I'm not saying that I'm an immigrant to Canada at any means. I've just transplanted in from other cities in Canada. And I have all the privilege that goes with being white and everything else. But I resented the suggestion that 13 years is somehow not enough time to have the kind of bona fides to be engaged in municipal politics here. In fact, I wasn't in Hamilton more than a year in my early 20s before I had a TV show talking local politics. So personally for me, that was a deal breaker with Andrea. That comment more than anything else, even more than her OShow where she wouldn't give specifics to me. I thought, if you're going to say that kind of thing, it's an entitlement, it's an old guard mentality. I can't stand it. I mean, I had a visceral response to that, and a lot of people I've talked to have as well. But that's me. Ameil, I think you have a very different take on all of this based on just some of the tweets that have been coming out. Where are you with the mayor's race?
I feel like many others that I'm in a bit of a mess. It feels messy.
Yeah.
I feel like, generally speaking, I feel like our current context allows too much for people to find themselves searching on social media for the good guy and the bad guy. And who do I align with and who do I oppose? Which camp do I belong to and who's affiliated with what? And I appreciate this show because it allows for us to just say outright that of course we don't agree and we have varying analyses and we learn from each other when we are given the opportunity to add the nuance. I think municipal politics is a place where we can also resist the scaffolds and the obstructions of party politics that often predetermine what a person can say, what they can respond to, what platform items are. And then we have this unique opportunity here in municipal politics to add nuance to the conversation instead of identifying good guy and bad guy, instead of placing people in camps, such that we can feel like we are informing the candidates on what matters to us. And maybe they can learn in this process as well through listening. I feel like we can do better at this, and this is that moment. And, you know, I appreciate this show for that. All that to say, I have more to say.
Please.
So
Great layup,
I
by
was,
the way, Professor. It was a great layup. I love it.
I was thinking, you know, that conversation about here first, you know, and here longest, and the ways that gets picked up and for what and what purpose, and then who it lands on is very complex. You know, there were people who thought, hey, Andrea stating that Keenan is a newcomer, and I've been here longer and first, participates in a kind of anti-immigrant rhetoric, anti-newcomer rhetoric. And I thought as well that it was curious to me that that attention was receiving so much more attention on social media, etc., when the same kinds of discursive maneuvers were laid out for people like Kojo in other debates where incumbents and other candidates were saying, I've been here this long, I live here, you know, positioning the person as other. And those things didn't get taken up the same way. And I was worried about, okay, are then we talking about this particular conflict and what it might mean so we can identify the good guy and the bad guy? Or could we also say, hey, let's pull this apart to see how people land on policy agenda items, platform items that think about newcomers and immigrants, that think about what here first discourses mean for Indigenous peoples that are often erased in these conversations, and you know, the problems and issues that newcomers, refugees, and racialized people have been raising about issues of quote unquote settlement in Hamilton for some time. I think we could get there, but we got stuck on some of these moments.
Yeah, and to your point about that, and some of the other, I've been hearing on social media, and this might just be as host of the OShow, but there were other debates where that was raised, not just the debate with Kojo. It came up, I think it might have been when I talked to Alex Wilson, and he talked about it being brought up by the incumbent in the Dundas-Flamborough race. You know, I've been here longer, this kind of idea of, I therefore have some sort of advantage. And it rankles me on levels, but I think we all come at it from our own experience of when we got here, what our experience has been coming here. The one thing I would say though, Ameil, is that even though it was in other debates and other races, the mayor's television debate got a ton of views. And I just know this by virtue of the traffic that I got because it was clipped on CH. Other media gave it a lot more attention. So I think it raised a little bit of that moment more than it did in those other debates. But I'm open this to the panel because I think it's an incredibly important point. But just before I move off of you, Ameil, did you also want to speak about the platforming of a white nationalist during that mayor's debate? Because you were quite concerned after, and you'd warned about it on our last OShow with you. Did you want to touch base on that anymore, or shall we move on?
Sure. I had this moment where my stomach just sunk to the ground, and when I saw him on TV, and it worried me in all kinds of ways, because for the same kinds of reasons that I've expressed on this show, that I feel like some of the ways we're engaging in some of these debates in the nuances on policies and platforms in the mayoral race, but also among the candidates, is sometimes obscuring our view from the very dangerous realities that are right in front of us right now. And, you know, I know there are rules for what can be platformed and why, and there are also stances that people can take, and let the community know that they are taking those stances. I would have liked to have seen a public decree of a white supremacist neo-Nazi running for mayor and being on the same channel as them for a debate, as well as some attention to these anti-woke candidates who are running on a platform that overtly states that trans people don't exist or aren't real, and that transphobia is okay, that talking and teaching about issues of racism is unwelcome and somehow dangerous, and you know that this belongs to some sort of indoctrination movement, these ideas that need to be shut down. Those things are ridiculous, and I think if we don't speak them, they just get to reside on their own. That worries me a great deal. I'm very concerned about that. I was driving up, Mill Grove Side Road to Highway 6, and I saw a lot of signs for one of these anti-woke candidates, and it terrified me. I felt that, if those things go unannounced, unnamed, unchecked, undenounced, then they leave a lot of people in harm's way.
I denounced it, and Cable 14 should not have had that person platformed. And I was glad to see Terry Cook also come out about it, as well as a number of others. Narinder, of course, had a very powerful message about it. And you yourself talked about how it made you feel. I think the words used were you felt sick watching it. So I'm really glad that there was a reaction that night in the moment to it, and some public denouncement of that moment happening in the mayor's debate. But I want to go to you, Graham, on everything we've talked about, but also on this issue, because I know with IElect as well, as you're putting information out there to inform, it's looking at what kind of people are there, and do you list them, or do you warn about them? Do you mention them? I mean, you have come on this program and you have talked about a candidate running in Ancaster who holds who's a homophobe, who holds homophobic views, right? And warning about that. So could you pick up on this nuanced thread that Dr. Ameil has started for us here?
I will certainly try. I mean, there's a reason Ameil is a professor and I'm not. His analysis is brilliant, I think. And certainly for someone like myself who has been, in the streets fighting for my own rights as a queer man, I'm sensitive to it. But Ameil, I must say, you peel an onion better than anyone I've ever met. I mean, you're just extraordinarily capable of seeing these things. I think that. Let me talk as IElect, and I know that people are claiming that I'm unable to speak as IElect and then speak as Graham Crawford, but I get that it's a little tricky and it's a little unusual, but it is what it is. At IElect, we discussed this because we agreed we would put out a list of final candidates, and we were adding to that list. We were taking our data from the city. And this person that Ameil spoke about, but also person I have spoken about on this show, were on the IElect list. And we did get some pushback from people, and that we were accused of platforming by listing. And I will confess, I hadn't viewed listing as platforming, but I didn't just dismiss it. It caused a lot of discussion. Because I am very sensitive to this. This was happening when I was, a gay rights activist in Toronto. There were people whose name we wouldn't speak out loud, and we're not doing it right now. We have not named this person because we will not give them that kind of attention. So Laura, it was a difficult decision. We actually published our last list anyway when this feedback was received. We didn't take it down. But I will tell you this, if I were to do this kind of thing again, I would consult more broadly before we published even a list. I absolutely understand, agree, and support that Cable 14 should not have recorded that guy, and they most certainly shouldn't have played it. That was appalling. It was a major blunder on their part. But I say that now, as a co-founder of IElect that did publish the name on our list. So I acknowledge that happened. And, I sure as hell didn't want to hurt anybody by that, but I've been further sensitized to it. And I'm sorry I'm going on a bit here, but this is why I think, back to Ameil, your analysis is so helpful, even for somebody like me who's been around for a long time. But I haven't seen the things that you've seen. I haven't experienced the things you've experienced. I've experienced different things. Mm-hmm. So I greatly appreciate it. And Laura, I'm sorry, but I do want to just say this. Ameil referenced it. That's why I like this show too, because we're talking about meaty issues and you give us the time to talk about them. You're not looking for sound bites. So thanks. Anyway, I'm done.
No, you know what? It's about engagement, right? And engagement, to Ameil's point and everybody's point, this is a messy election. We're seeing moments that make us all feel kind of cringeworthy stuff. Much of it is fighting on the progressive end of the spectrum. I mean, if you look at the top two candidates, their policies around affordable housing and around a number of different issues aren't that far apart, right? So there is a concern that there's going to be sort of a split on the center progressive in this city, which is horrifying, given what Ameil just pointed out, that there are people running with lots of lawn signs who are actually against progress and against individuals based on their color or based on whatever. I mean, we have some real dangerous candidates in the race. I do not put in that category Keenan Loomis running for mayor. We have candidates out there who hold and espouse views that are harmful, like literally harmful to others, to their freedom and their safety. And this is in a city which, as one of our Twitter followers pointed out, is one of, if not still, the hate capital of Canada in terms of reported hate crimes. And they've gone up in the last couple of years, even as we've been trying to address the issue. So it terrifies me to hear Dr. Ameil talk about driving around and feeling afraid of who might get around that council table. It's incredibly important. So Graham, if you guys can talk about this stuff as long as you feel it's necessary, because we'll get a lot of people watching this program who are in this messy election looking for all of you with your different perspectives and your expertise to clarify it for them, right? To help them understand what matters and what is not as consequential. And I want to go to you, Robert, on this, because I think Ameil mentioned he was out when he was sort of traveling around more rurally, but that doesn't mean that there aren't people who might be running in other downtown wards who espouse some of these views. I mean, we just talked about Ancaster as an example up on the mountain. How do you feel about some of the people who are running in this race and what they believe in? And I think we're pivoting a little bit over to the council race, but this is a free-flowing show, so you can go wherever you'd like, Robert. Are you concerned, as Ameil is, that there are some people running that have some perspectives that are harmful to where Hamilton is supposed to be heading?
Laura, absolutely. I agree with Ameil, and he put it well put out there, what he said. I guess when I was watching the debate for the mayor's debate, and I was kind of, I wouldn't say I was enjoying the show, but I was quite interested in it, and I'm following it along. And then along comes a certain candidate with the recording on the cable 14, and I was taken back. Okay, I goes, what is going on here? This is improper to be put out there for the public viewing, for the viewers who are wanting to learn and get information and listen to the candidates for mayor race. Ameil has mentioned up Millgrove Side Road, which I've traveled hundreds of times. I'm surprised those signs would be out there. It's blown me away. And I don't know what they're thinking out there. It's whether they're not aware of stuff or they just watch things that aren't suitable to be watched and listened to. Social media sure changed how politics and how people view politics and how they vote. It's an opportunity for the people to say anything to anybody they want to, and it can be damning, there's no doubt. And this particular individual should not have had the opportunity to be recorded or be placed on that show.
I want to go to you, Margaret, on it, because I mentioned earlier you had a powerful tweet yesterday. You clearly use social media to advance your analysis of the election, and the Spectator does as well. They certainly tweet out. What's your take on the conversation that we're having, whether it's around the how long have you been in Hamilton discussion, or some of these other things like Cable 14 giving platform to the white nationalists running for mayor?
I did write about that. I wrote about in my Andrea or Horvath versus Keenan round one blog post on the debate, where I was actually interested. I'm going to be a little bit different from my co-panelists here. I was a little interested to see what he was going to say, this person who shall not be named, right? I'm not part of that discussion. I don't engage myself with that kind of rhetoric and talk and discourse. So it, to me, is always an education to learn about what some people are thinking about in our community, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't know that there are people who support this guy if there weren't signs out, right? And we would think that it's all just fine and it's not happening, but it's bubbling under the surface. So in my blog post, I did say that, I can't remember exactly how I termed it, but I did something to the effect that, okay for Cable 14 to have put that out there, only to the point that we need to know about this stuff. It doesn't help us being the people who don't engage with it, to put our heads in the sand and think that this kind of rhetoric isn't out there, or we need to call it for what it is. I would have liked to have seen Cable 14 actually say something about it with a disclaimer. In fact, and when I wrote about it in my blog post, I linked automatically to links that were about this person and what an odious philosophy he's got. What a platform, what a terrible. It's not, I think said something about like, it's not conducive to a peaceful society. And so it has to come up, and then it has to be attacked. It has to be put back. It has to be addressed. Otherwise, it's going to exist in underground enclaves, and people are going to talk about it, and they're going to talk about how they're silenced, and it's going to be grievous to them. It's going to add to their grievances. They're going to be more persecuted in the way they're feeling. But they have to be addressed. They have to come out, and they have to have the weight of the society come down on them, as opposed to just this person and that person and this person. It has to be an overwhelming condemnation, not just so that that one person can see the effects of their comments, but so that everybody else can see it too, because we're living in a community that we're bouncing off of ideas off of everybody all the time.
And last point to you, Dr. Ameil, on this, and then I want to pivot over a little bit to some of the other politics going on.
Well, I feel like this is a very soothing, I guess, conversation for me. I feel like there's people that get it, and I don't always see that or hear it, and that's the kind of thing that makes me fearful. For one particular reason that I'll be brief about, and David Duke, who's the former leader or head of the KKK, said very publicly his agenda was to platform and mainstream white supremacist hateful ideas, full stop. That was his purpose. And he found a way to do it and won him an election. I feel like that kind of thing is happening right now. It's happening not only in Hamilton, but it's happening globally. And the ways we can identify and name how those hateful ideas are being mainstreamed helps us all feel that we all get it, and that we care about one another and it matters to us. And so when people use the discourse of, special interest groups to refer to racialized people or disabled people or our 2S LGBT community or Indigenous folks, that tells us something about what their idea of regular interest is and normal interest is. And when it's used specifically to dog whistle, that kind of anti-woke supporters and those kinds of folks, to antagonize and demonize and dehumanize others, we have to name those things for what they are. And that discourse is being used right now in Hamilton.
And it's insidious, right? And it's creeping through. And I want to go to you on this, Graham, because I mentioned off the top that Bob Bertina seems to be running a US style election. The ads that are coming out of the Bertina campaign make me sick. And I'm hoping that they will backfire tremendously, because they feel Trump style. They are simplistic, they are misleading, they are dog whistles, but it might be effective. What do you think?
Well, I think it's shameful, is what I think. I think it's absolutely shameful. I've never been a fan of Bob's as a politician. Like I said on this show, he was a fine broadcaster, but He's a crappy politician. But even I don't believe that Bob deep down believes those messages. But what I do believe is that his advice, and Bob takes the advice, it's his name that goes out there. He's surrounded himself by advisors and campaign management types that are conservatives and the right-leaning conservatives. I mean, quite right-leaning, and it shows up in the messages. That a kind of American carnage style text messaging. I haven't heard a single person from any part of this community that has said, well, I think he's right. These are some of the key issues we've got to talk about. One of the things that I pointed out, by the way, I think they're filled with lies as well. I mean, they're not just things we disagree with and shouldn't be promoting.
Right.
Crime is not soaring. And it's either true or it isn't true. The chief of police says it's not, and he puts out crime stats that show a decline year over year over year. That doesn't mean hate crime is going down, because it's not. But that's not the kind of crime Bob's talking about in his messages. It's like people being attacked on the streets, children being stolen, dogs being killed. I mean, it's like, oh my God, it's the chaos. We've got to control it. I'm going to say it, Laura, it's bullshit, but it's frightening bullshit. It should stop. I hope it costs him not just the election, but his reputation and whatever legacy he's got as an announcer, because I don't think he has a good legacy as a politician. It should stop. It is shameful. It's appalling. I don't know if you want me to go on to others, but we can, because that's my certain view.
Well, let me just jump in on the Bob thing for a second, because it's not just the text messages for people watching who might not have been on the receiving end. I finally got one of them. It's also in his Cable 14 appearance where he got to have that pre-recorded message because he was home with COVID, which obviously hurt his campaign not to be on the stage, right? He's not even in any of the media shots of the two front runners now. So I'm sure that was painful for him as a candidate. But the screed that he did during his candidate opening on Cable 14 it reminded me of the American carnage speech that Trump gave on his inauguration. I mean, talking about the scariness in the streets and women afraid to go out and the rising crime and now in some of his campaign stuff, this candidate, and he's like mixing in council candidates like Narinder, talking about detasking police. Like he is going places that not just seem desperate, but they seem despicable. And I'm just concerned that given how effective it was, at least in the 2016 cycle in US politics, that it might have some kind of attraction here. Margaret, you are a woman of letters. What has been your thought on the campaigning coming out of the Bertina campaign? And do you think he's like out of the race and we should just move on, or should we highlight this for our viewers in case they're getting seduced by the fear?
So I wrote a blog post. It says, don't vote for Bob.
How do you really feel though, Margaret? We really want to know how you feel.
I didn't get one of the text messages. I don't know why. I'm not going to complain. I didn't get it. I was able to see what everybody else got though. And it was lazy. It was lazy. It was contemptible. It was Bob Bertina, and that's what we're going to get. We're going to get special interest groups all the time. Everybody that's not a white male will be a special interest group, right? And this is, and I'm left wondering, who is he targeting with these? Because he's not targeting me, he's not targeting you, he's not targeting us. Who is he targeting? He's targeting people who are just at home on their phones, the ones that are afraid to go out, the ones that, I'm thinking maybe an older population, certainly a pro-police faction, because his defund message, and I want to say this too about a number of them, because I've been binge watching the war debates. And the number of people who are against this defund notion, right? And the media that's presenting it as a defund idea, as opposed to a detasking idea, is troubling for me. Like, I would like to see that conversation as a detasking one, as opposed to a defunding one. That is not where we're going with that. It's not sophisticated enough to deal with what we need to do, especially in the light of the recent happening where the young person who was tasered by a police officer at Canadian Tire. Don't know much about it, but a police officer showed up at a medical emergency and it exacerbated the situation. That's a detasking issue. I wanted to get that out there because I'm hearing that from a lot of candidates, and they're saying it as a way to, I'm thinking, assuage a certain demographic that they're looking for. And that demographic isn't necessarily the progressive. It is the conservative, I guess, element. I noticed it mostly in the rural wards. What
about the ward Kojo's running in, though? All the media coverage of that particular ward debate was on the defund the police, that he was the standalone person calling to defund the police. I thought that was ridiculous. There are many things going on in that populist ward beyond just his stance on detasking.
Well, they've jumped on this, right? And Bertina particularly has jumped on this in the way he's attacked Narinder Nan about this, about defunding and detasking. And it's real fear mongering. It's total fear mongering, and it's beneath him. And we don't need that. When I first read the tweet, I thought, oh my God, do I live in Gotham City? Where is that? When you need, come on. Like I'm not afraid to walk down the streets in this city. I'm not. I've lived here. Oh my God, I can't say it. I can't believe I said it.
No, I need to know the numbers, Margaret. How long have you lived in Hamilton? Apparently this matters now. Jesus. Okay, I'll let that go. I want to go to the ward races a little bit. Go ahead, Margaret. You had something else to say?
I want to go back to something that, and I want to maybe address this to Ameil. Do you think that the discourse in municipal politics lends itself more to this nativism idea than any other race, provincial or federal? Because how long we've lived here seems to be what everybody's talking about. Everybody's mentioning, I was born here, I was raised here, I was listening to somebody, I'm the 5th generation in my ward here. This touchstone to longevity in the space. Is that something that do our panelists think is particularly germane to municipal politics?
Well, we know Harper tried it with the old stock Canadian garbage when he was running against Trudeau. We had to call that out then when we heard it, right? It was a dog whistle. And I found it particularly pernicious. But Ameil, she's posed the question to you, and then we'll jump to some ward stuff.
Yeah, I would say it has definitely a historical legacy, this kind of idea of who belongs in Canada or in Hamilton. In Hamilton, it has a unique flavor. So I would say it's not the same across all municipalities or, a kind of product of municipal politics. In Hamilton, I feel like it has a unique kind of resonance. People have an idea in their mind about what Hamiltonian means, who it includes, what people stand for, a historical legacy of labor, of industry and activism and attention to social needs, that this is a kind of commonality. There was an idea of an us here at one point. And I feel like that continuing legacy kind of bleeds into ideas today, and people draw on it and pull on it. It's the kind of thing that doesn't serve us well when we try to query or critique the fact that we have these really, really long-term incumbents that have an advantage in terms of power for being in place for so long, and the ways they've kind of built fellowship relationships with developers, et cetera. And that restricts the ability for new ideas to come in and new perspectives.
Absolutely. And some that may tie in a little bit to some of the labeling I've certainly been using of the old guard. It's not an age thing. It's to distinguish a certain view of the city and who gets to have power and what does that power look like, and that kind of entitlement. And that's why I said earlier, I had to put out a lawn sign for Keenan Loomis. I've never put out a lawn sign or endorsed a candidate ever before an election, I don't think, publicly. But after hearing that from Andrea in the debate, which she's had the opportunity, by the way, to revisit, and I haven't seen the revisiting of it. I've seen what's more likened to gaslighting, that it wasn't actually what she said. So many of us heard that. And I thought, I can't be a part of that. That's old school, old guard politics, the sense of, Hamilton runs a certain way. This is how it works here. You better go along to get along. It frightens me, because after finally having 7 of council leave of the old guard, there are still some remaining. And you know what? They might be experienced and they might be okay, but boy, I don't want any more of that thinking coming around that council chamber. We've fought against it for far too long. Everyone in the city deserves the opportunity to be heard, to be engaged, to be respected. And we haven't seen enough of that with the old guard. And I don't want that getting back in for another 4 years. So end of my rant on that. Let me go ahead. Yeah, Ameil?
Just one more point on the Bertina conversation about the text messaging and so forth. You know, we've been talking about how we increase, you know, the ways we engage more community members about more issues in ways that are more equitable. And, you know, I feel like this show helps with that project. I think as well, when we talk about fairness and power, not everyone feels that they can speak up and speak out about some of these issues, especially some of these very problematic candidates and their hateful platforms, because they know that the voters list is provided to candidates, and that they could potentially be identified by some of these hateful candidates. So that's kind of one of the ways we can also think about how we, you know, look out for one another and who gets to use their position and power to speak up for those that can't.
Well, I want to thank all of you here. I know I don't need to, but all of you have spoken out against those candidates running and the messages and the hateful ideas that they espouse. I mean, there's a lot of sport in Hamilton politics. We like to play rough in this town. At the end of the day, though, who sits around that council table has power, whether it's the mayor or any of these councillors who might be in there a lot longer than a mayor. And if they come in and they have these ideas that treat certain Hamiltonians differently than others, it does not bode well for building a safe, inclusive, sustainable, resilient city. It does just the opposite. It drags us back to the Stone Age. So, Graham, let me go to you. In the few minutes that we have remaining, you know, any thoughts you have on this discussion, which I always love on the OShow goes wherever it goes, but also on some ward races. Is there anything particular you're watching? And I'm just going to put one out there because we did have an OShow viewer say, please analyze the Ward 8 race. Is there potential that Danko could be beaten by any of the people running against him? So I'll throw that little surprise nugget at you, Graham, and then please take this anywhere you'd like in terms of the ward races.
My assessment of Ward 8, I'm watching all of them, and I watched the debates. I don't think John Paul Danko is at risk of returning, personally. What I will really want to make, though, because I have watched the debates, and there are some things that worry me greatly. When the question of defunding the police comes up, it's the responses that talk about hands off the police budget, wouldn't shave a nickel. You know, stupid, lame kind of commentary that says, well, if you're ever in trouble, what do? You call 911, right? It's like, yeah, well, of course I do. And I will continue to do that. But that is not the point. We have a much, much bigger issue to talk about with the police. But there are many candidates, and I mean many, a shocking number, who say hands off, which means if a selection of those people get back to council, it's more rubber stamping of the police budget. That worries me. Another thing that worries me that seems to be a pattern as well, it touches on affordable housing, but it touches on affordable housing in terms of opposition to gentle densification. So if we're going to lock our urban boundary, the only way to have more people here is to build within existing communities or neighborhoods. And despite what Andrea says about it's not about building, it's not about number of units, it's about building communities. Well, we're going to be building units in communities because it's the only way we can do it if our boundary is fixed. And we have a lot of opposition from a lot of candidates. And let me give you one example, which I found just awful, is Ward 5. Almost to a person, except for Linda Lukasik, is saying no gentle densification in Ward 5. This is Chad Collins talking again, and of course there's a mini-me Chad Collins that's running in that race, and Ward 5 isn't going to change a bit if some of those people get in, particularly if this guy gets in, and I'm not even using his name, although I could. That worries me. This is a citywide issue. We've got candidates who don't want to support gentle densification. How are we going to do this? We cannot do it. We need to do it as an entire city. That worries me greatly. And lastly, one of the other patterns is lowering taxes. I mean, nobody wants them to go up. Nobody wants to pay more, but we do want a better city for all. And we can't run on platforms and build a city if we say we're going to spend less. It's going to cost more, but we could also be more efficient, so we can find savings, but we may also need to add revenue. That worries me. Those are three patterns I've seen from the debates, and I don't like where that leads us to, because you know where it leads us to? Exactly where we've been for the last 20 years. Nothing will change. And it worries me greatly. There's a lot of people saying the same shit they've been saying for 20 years.
And I'll just pick up on that, the column in today's Spectator that said that, you know what, this election is sleepy now because enough change has already happened around the council table by some of those people leaving. And so, you know, boring, snooze, affordable housing, snooze, area rating. No, actually, it's about trust and leadership. It's incredibly important. And affordable housing is a life and death issue. And I cannot stand it when we have this old guard narrative, even coming from a newspaper columnist saying, you know, if it's not about some quick, binary, easy to grab into issue like a train or a stadium, that it's a snooze fest. It is the opposite of a snooze fest. It is a life and death election for all the reasons we spent the last 45 minutes talking about. If some of these people get in who don't see other Hamiltonians as having the same human value, that's a big freaking problem. And if we have people who get in there that don't want to do affordable housing because of NIMBYism, that's a big freaking problem. And we have to have people with courage and conviction and ethics and compassion around that council table. These council races matter. I'm going to stop ranting and go to you, Councillor Pasuta, former Councillor Pasuta. Is it? Do you think we're going to see change, or are you concerned that we might see some old thinking that's not going to help the city progress?
Laura, you're going to get everything you just said. Okay, it's going to come right at us. There is going to be some old guard thinking. There's going to be people coming in that, as I said before, they've only have one thing on their mind. They don't see the big picture of their role as a councillor. And there's a lot of learning to do. And it takes upwards of a year to catch on to everything. Somebody, a candidate for award says, oh, I'm going to go through page by page and all the financials and start saving the city money. There's no way you can go through those numbers. We get it all condensed when I was in council in front of us. And there's enough numbers in front of us just to, you know, spin your mind. Never mind all the numbers that are out there that staff have worked on. It's I'm a little afraid of what's going to be happening in my mind of some of the ones who may be candidates who will get in. I'm fearful of it, for not only for myself but the city as a whole. When I was at the council, and most of the time, and Graham, you watched a lot of it, I supported city councillors. Many of their motions and what they wanted moving forward. So we need people in there that are going to focus on the whole city and the city issues. And yes, we need affordable housing. We need this. We need safe streets. We need police. We can't get rid of the police. We need them. There is issues, and staff. As far as staffing at the city, there is problems with staffing too. I can tell you that. When I was there, in fact, here's just a quick pivot. I had one of the senior staff members come to me in the purchasing department, had an appointment, came into my office, sat down and started telling me I can't get involved in purchasing. And I said, I know that. And he said, but you did. And it was because they gave out a tender to somebody who didn't qualify. He turned around and said to me, I'm taking you to integrity commissioner. I stood up and I said, you want to say that again? And he did. And I said, okay, you can leave. He turns around the door and he comes back. Oh, by the way, we put it back out for tender. This shit goes on there all the time. And so we need to get that straightened up. We need to have a council that's got some, I'll be polite, balls. I'm sorry for the ladies, but you need to come in there but you have to, everybody has to cooperate once they get in. That is the main focus of a council and a mayor, to cooperate. And we need to move forward. Just one quick thing before we go. On the mayor's former MP Bob Martinez, when he did his messaging, he was a bitter man reading from a teleprompter. and he was using scare and fear tactics to get votes. And to me, that was so wrong. So with that, thank you, Laura.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. And I'm going to I'll give you last word on the show, Margaret. But Ameil, is there any comments you want to make on the ward races? We've been speaking in big themes and narratives on this show, and I love it. And I know I have you all back the day before the election. I might push you all for one more show in between because there's so much going on. But Ameil, from the bigger picture we've been talking about, is there anything you want to add in terms of people's consideration as they look at the ward races?
Yeah, I think those kind of gotcha moments in the debates or on questions about defunding the police, they're really important. This is the opportunity where we can add some nuance to the conversation, which, for example, Kojo did.
Yes.
And this example that Margaret raised, where an employee at Canadian Tire, who is Black, had an epileptic seizure and was basically attacked by a number of police. And pinned to the ground and tasered. And this is on video, it's been shared on social media. If we can't take that example and hold it up and query it for what it reveals to us, and we can't name things like gender-based violence or hate crimes and what we do about mental health and responses to it, if those things are off the table because you're either this side or that side, then we don't get to do the nuance. And that is the kind of thing that I feel like we could do better as a community and adding nuance to the ward debates.
Let me end with you, Margaret, because you more than anyone are constantly trying to raise the discourse and get people to get more informed. Any thoughts on the mayor's race, the ward races, or how you want to leave this OShow before we have you guys back on?
I think I just said what I want to say about the mayor's race so far. I haven't really said much about Loomis and his position. The thing that concerns me most about him is the area rating. I think for me, the question is area rating. It's been hanging around on our heads for so long. And I watched the Bimbrook debate the other day. And I have to say, I was quite disappointed at the way the candidates had addressed that issue of transit. And it left me feeling with this idea of Bimbrook as being this gated community that only drivers can get into. That there's no other way to do that. And it goes to this way in which the candidates either have something that they have a vision that they're putting forward, or they're changing their vision to reflect what they're hearing from their constituents, right? Which is no area rating, no intensification in any of these heritage sensitive areas like Stony Creek. I mean, it bothers me about that we've got these little wards out there that are positioning themselves as exceptional and special to the rest of Hamilton. Having said that, I would encourage everybody to watch all the ward races, whether you're in that ward or not, because it tells you a lot about the differences between us that are coming up in these different wards. Like, I had no idea that there were water issues in Hamilton in the rural areas. Like, I believed that everybody had clean drinking water, but that's not the case. These are the things that, and it really highlights the difference too between the urban and the rural divide. If we can all educate ourselves about what we all need, we'll all be able to engage more respectfully with each other instead of just cutting people off and saying, that's not my issue, or that's not my issue. We can say, I hear that's your issue. How can we help it? And the ward debates have been really helpful in asking candidates how they would see themselves as part of Hamilton and not just the ward itself. So I'm looking at the incumbent debates, trying to think about who could possibly replace the incumbents. I'm looking at the new people and wondering wondering who there will replace people. So it's
I can tell you, Ward 6 candidate Sly has more signs on Upper Ottawa than Tom Jackson, which shocked me because it's
which
almost
one?
Sly. His last name is Sly.
Chris Sly.
And he's got more signs on a main thoroughfare up here in Ward 6 than Tom Jackson, which I have never seen before in a municipal election. It's always just been Jackson. So I'm interested in talking to Sly, hopefully before the election, maybe even here on the OShow, to understand more about where Chris stands on things. But Graham, I can see you want to get in the last word here. Go ahead.
I do, and I don't mean to hog the last word, but I hear something. I've heard it actually from a number of candidates who I've spoken to, which I think gives me a little bit of hope also. At the door, candidates are being asked, who are you voting for mayor? So I'm talking about ward candidates, council candidates. And I said, well, are many people doing that? And I was told by a couple of candidates, oh, 1 in 3. And I'm thinking, okay, what does that tell us? It tells us that it's on people's minds. It tells us that they have not yet made up their minds. It says that they're contemplating and they're looking for some advice. Now, I am happy to report that the councillors, don't I wish, the candidates that I've been speaking to don't say, I'm voting for. They're smart enough to say, well, what is it that's important to you? And they try to draw it out and just try to provide the names. That I think is a good thing. That's a good sign. If let's say that's accurate. Let's say 30% of people haven't decided yet. I think it's a good, there's hope here.
So this doesn't have to be a sleepy election. We don't have to assume that we're going to have low voter turnout. We can all keep bringing to the table the imperative that the city, to Robert's point, if we don't educate and vote for good candidates around the council table, to your fear, we are going to get some of that old thinking that has held the city back. And our climate can't handle it. Our people living in poverty can't handle it. People who are being discriminated against can't handle more of the same. So we all need to keep pushing and educating and having these nuanced conversations. Thank you so much. We went a little long, but I'm never going to shut any of you up. So thank you so much, Dr. Ameil Joseph. As always, you get us thinking on the next level. Robert Pasuta, value so much that you've been around that table and you know of what you speak. And Margaret Shkimba, you're fearless and always pushing, and I love it. And Graham Crawford, for your optimism, your criticism, but also, of course, IElect has done a whole bunch of work trying to get people engaged in this election. And you don't have a slate of candidates. You're just constantly pushing out what candidates are doing so that people can make their decisions. So I appreciate all of you being on the OShow. And to Margaret's point, check out not just the debates, but check out the profiles we've done on some of the candidates running in some of the ward races. And if you haven't seen the Keenan Loomis Mayoral interviews and the Andrea Horvath one, you should, because I think both of them are quite revealing if you still haven't made up your mind in the mayor's race. We'll be back with more OShow at Hamilton's Municipal Affairs Show. Watch it all on YouTube. And thank you all so much. Take care. And vote October 24th. Vote no matter what. Thanks, guys.